on today's Story Beat.
All you need to succeed, really, you need talent for sure. And talent requires a lot of sweat and a lot of work and a lot of failure. And you need courage and you need to be real. And you need not to think you're owed anything because you're not.
This is StoryBeat with Steve Cuden, a podcast for the creative mind. StoryBeat explores how masters of creativity develop and produce brilliant works that people everywhere love and admire. So join us as we discover how talented creators find success in the worlds of imagination and entertainment. Here now is your host, Steve Cuden.
Thanks for joining us on Story Beat. We're coming to you from the Steel City, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My guest today, Barry Greenfield, is making his second appearance on Story Beat. He's a working musician and songwriter whose career spans from 1968 to the present. His 12 CDs have enjoyed global sales. Barry's written 3 #1 songs and had 20-plus songs covered by other artists. In 2025, his music was selected by HBO, BBC TV, and Australia Films for their original programming. Barry's also an author. His first book, a memoir, My Journey to Blue Sky, was published in March 2025. He and I chatted about My Journey to Blue Sky during our first conversation. You can find that episode on storybeat.net, wherever you listen to podcasts, and on YouTube. Barry's second book is a novel called All You Need Is Courage, which I thoroughly enjoyed reading. It tells the fictional tale of a young songwriter meeting and working with his heroes, the Beatles, during their heyday. The saga has more than a few parallels to Barry's own history. If you enjoy stories about hardworking artists triumphing in the music business, I highly urge you to read All You Need Is Courage. You may find it to be truly inspirational. Barry's also written music for a documentary he produced called My Day in Auschwitz. A selection from that film, The Gate, was published in the Yad Vashem 2025 coffee table book, Lessons from the Shoah. Please stick around at the end of this episode because Barry has generously lent us his fantastic song, The Beautiful Band, which we'll play for your listening pleasure. So for all those reasons and many more, I'm truly honored to welcome back to StoryBeat the deeply talented singer-songwriter and author, Barry Greenfield. Barry, thanks so much for joining me again.
100% my pleasure. I'm honored to be here, and I truly enjoy working with you.
It's great to chat with you, Barry. You're an easygoing, wonderful guest. So we're going to talk a lot about your book here today. But since we last spoke, are you continuing to write songs as well as prose?
Oh, yeah, daily, if not weekly. The last 2 songs I've written have been sort of unique. I wrote a song about the monarchy. I had very little interest in the British monarchy, but with the downfall and the disaster that Andrew Mountbatten has become, I found that a fascinating idea for a song. So my second to last song was about the monarchy. And over the last 5 years, but certainly the last 3 years, I've been dealing with heart issues. And I'm debating with the cardiac surgeon actually next week whether we can go to surgery. So I wrote a song called Coronary Artery Disease. Now, these are not the same kind of songs as Save the Last Dance for Me or No Reply, but they're still 3-4 minute songs with a story. And yes, in answer to your question, I'm still writing songs, and I try to write songs that make people think more than tap their foot.
I assume then you're still passionate about writing music and writing in general.
It's not a choice. It's who I am. I've collaborated with some of the great songwriters of the planet, and one of them looked at me one day across the room and said, songwriting to you is oxygen, Barry, probably 20 years ago. And I think that's quite an astute observation of all the great songwriters. I've had songs that have done extremely well, but managed to live a life in the shadows by choice. And I've never had to follow In the Air Tonight, as Phil Collins did. So it's always been easy for me to keep on trying to top myself because I've never had that Grammy-winning or Oscar-winning song And I think that's almost a blessing for an artist, because all an artist needs to do is make art. And I've been able to do that since age 15, and I'm 75 now.
And that passion has been the same for all these years, or has it changed in some way?
I still get nervous when I perform. I do 2 concerts a year, both 2.5 hours long, without stop. Still go in the studio most every year. I love that. The passion is not really increased and not really decreased. I have a very, very good memory, and I remember going to Apple in '68. I remember working in Hollywood in the '70s, and I remember my early work in Nashville, which lasted about 2 years in the early 2000s, 2008, 2009. And they all were fascinating chapters of adventure, excitement, growth, and making art that came from my heart. I've always made sure that the people in the room, where possible, were super, super talented. And that brings me up to another level because of the surrounding environment. That's very important. You're as strong as your weakest link when you make music.
Mm-hmm. You clearly are not the same human you were when you were a teenager. You have grown, you've changed, you've had a family, you've done work in all sorts of different ways. So you're not the same person. No one is over time. Everyone changes. What do you think is different about you today as an artist than when you first started? Other than you've obviously had experience, but what is different about your abilities, your passion, your art, your creativity?
I have a deal with my daughter. I have 3 daughters. The oldest one is 42. Her name is McCartney. And she comes to every show. I say that with some disclaimer. She might have missed 1 or 2 over the decades. But we have a deal that when I can't cut it or the voice falters, I'll let her tell me. And then I will make the adjustments of probably not doing them, I think. So without risking, with risking the chance of sounding a little bit sure and confident, I think my shows are getting better. I think my storytelling is getting better. I'm very new to this writing stuff, this making of books. So I can't really judge that. I've done 3 books now. 2 of them have been published. The other one is still being worked on. I'm just getting better. And I think maybe my great songs were written maybe in the '70s, but every so often I hit the mark again. And I've not written 80 great songs in my life. I've written probably 12, maybe 15, but I've written probably hundreds of good songs. But great songs like Hey Jude, I'm Not in Love, Procol Harum song, The Whiter Shade of Pale, they're few and far in between.
Yes, well, The Whiter Shade of Pale for me is one of the great glorious songs of all time, that's for sure.
Absolutely, and 40 years ago, Paul McCartney said it was his favorite single of all time. I'm not sure if that's true today, but it's a fantastic piece of art.
For me, it's the Beach Boys' God Only Knows. To me, that's the greatest song ever written. The Beatles are close. There's a bunch of stuff in there that's close.
If you ask me what my favorite 3 or 4 songs are ever written, God Only Knows is in that list. There's 2 I can think that mean more to my heart. Day in the Life, I really like that. And I really have a very hard place for Jumpin' Jack Flash. I think Jumpin' Jack Flash is a masterpiece. I love the lyrics. And it wasn't until I was in my mid-50s that I realized that what Mick does a lot is he draws a list. I was raised by a bearded, toothless hag. I was schooled and strapped right across my back. He does a list of lines. And boy, is that an easy way to write a song.
Explain to the listeners why that makes it easy to write a song. Explain that.
Well, if you're making a list, there doesn't have to really be much continuity between the lines. You don't have to go A, B, C, D, where A, B, C, D are related. All you have to do is give it 3 or 4 images. And it's a cheating style that works some of the time, but because it's easy, it sometimes doesn't work all the time. Radar Love is another great song with a list. John Lennon never uses lists. He uses a straight line, a literary line that tells a story, be it a ramble or not. But Jumpin' Jack Flash is a list. And what's the other one? There's lots of Rolling Stones songs that are lists. You can't always get what you want. Just different images, a list of what happened in in London that week. You know, I went down to the Chelsea drugstore to get your prescriptions filled. It's a really satisfying way to write a song. And to the young songwriters out there, try it. Don't try and tell a story. Just try and make a list. If I may, I read a really fascinating story about how David Bowie and Queen wrote Under Pressure. And they wanted to collaborate together because they were always looking for ways of making money and spreading their brand. So they thought if we put the two brands together, it'll probably work. So they go in the studio, and Bowie is very, very confident. All the Queen guys are really nervous. And Bowie says, well, here's what I want to do. John Deacon had the riff for Under Pressure. We'll just use this riff. And he gave them all a piece of paper, and he said, just write down 4 lines. They don't have to make any sense together, and just write down 4 lines. And they all did. Freddie Mercury, Brian May, John Deacon. And then Bowie just took the 4 pages, got Freddie Mercury to go, na 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 na, like the beginning of the song, you'll hear him go na 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 na, and then he just read these lines. Now they weren't congruent, and they weren't done by the same person, done by 4 different people, but it became a song. And I thought, Bowie said he does it all the time to them. And I thought that was another interesting little trick that I've used. There's many ways to get to the top of the mountain without, say, The Last Dance for me being the route.
Interesting. You've given me a whole insight here that I had not really thought through. I know about list songs and patter songs and that kind of thing, but I had not thought of what you're talking about before the way you just described it, which I think is really a marvelous way to think about how to write a song that, if the music is catchy, then the lyrics should be kind of interesting as well, if the music is catchy.
Let me add you a 4th song to our list with Jumpin' Jack Flash and Day in the Life and God Only Knows and Procol Harum, White Shade of Pale. And this one is in that league, and that's Life on Mars. It's a god-awful small affair to the girl with the mousy hair. Then he gets talking about sailors in fights and policemen. I'm sure it's one of those songs where he took strands of air, strands of lyrics from his book, that thoughts that he had and wrote down. But the bed that they sit on, the Procol Harum bed of White Shade of Pale, the beautiful, beautiful acoustic guitar and piano in Day in the Life, the phenomenal riff of Jumpin' Jack Flash that Bill Wyman says was stolen from him by Keith. Keith gave him no credit for it. Are enormously comfortable feather beds. So if you have, like you said a second ago, a really solid, comfortable, warm, understood feather bed, the lyrics sit on it, and as long as they're smart, they don't have to rhyme. They just have to have a melody that's good and fits the tune. And Life on Mars is a wonderful example of that.
When Bowie died, I played that song I don't know how many times, over and over again, because it's just such a rich and beautiful song, both the lyrics and the melody, which you need both of those, don't you? It can't just be a beautiful melody with meaningless, ridiculous lyrics. Those also have to work. But if you have beautiful lyrics and the music is not listenable, then it doesn't work either. You have to have both married together, don't you?
You're as strong as your weakest link with a song. So if you have a Bay City Roller lyric with a catchy tune, it might be a hit, but it won't live. But if you have a phenomenal lyric and a phenomenal tune, like bands like Yes had, and My Girl by The Temptations, I think it's a Smokey song, but I'm not sure, or Ball of Confusion, or Cloud Nine, or Papa Was a Rolling Stone by Norman Whitfield, the Motown guy. You've got a gem. And that's why frequently there's partnerships. There's lyricists like Hal David and melody writers like Burt Bacharach and Rodgers and Hart. But then you have the guys like Cole Porter that can do it all, and Bob Dylan that can do it all. But I just like to share a personal note, and that is the night that you played Life on Mars, when we didn't know each other, I wrote a song called Bowie. I wrote it, started it that night, and I finished it that night, and I recorded it that week, the day he died, 2016, just after his birthday. And about 10 minutes ago, I was drawing up a set list for my next show, and not knowing you were going to mention that song, I added Bowie, which I haven't played for a decade, into the set. because it's one of my favorite songs. And of course, before I play it, I tell the story that I love Bowie. I think Bowie's the best solo act ever. Life on Mars is a masterpiece, as is all of Hunky Dory.
Well, let's hear it for synchronicity, that it just came up and you just, you just thought about it. That's interesting. Interesting. Well, let's talk about your book, All You Need Is Courage. Tell the listeners what All You Need Is Courage is all about, more than what I described in the intro.
When I was 17 years old, in May 1968, Joe Garagiola and Tallulah Bankhead, who were the co-hosts of The Tonight Show, interviewed Paul McCartney and John Lennon. And it was one of the most amazing nights of my life, and I was only 17, but John and Paul came through the curtain at midnight. Tallulah Bankhead was drunk. Joe Garagiola was just completely out of his depth, didn't have a clue how to interview anybody. All he could do was catch a baseball, I guess. I'm sure a very nice man, but not an interviewer of Johnny Carson's ilk. And it was a terrible, terrible interview. It lasted 22 minutes, but it was just perfect for me because I saw John and Paul do something they didn't do, which was talk about this new invention they had, which was called Apple Records. And John said to me, the 70-year-old kid in Vancouver, Canada, we want you to come to London, we want you to bring your songs and your poems, and there'll be no one in a suit waiting for you. So I had $800 in the bank, which I had worked for, packing groceries to pay for my first year of university, and I took it out of the bank and I bought a ticket on BOAC, and I flew to London, and that was a lot of courage to do that. I was scared. I'd never really left my parents' home. I'd never really done anything musically. But I believed in my songs. I've been writing for 2 years, since age 15. And I walked into Apple and I walked up to the receptionist and I said, I'd like to meet John Lennon. And she was freaked out. And I did meet Derek Taylor, and I played Derek Taylor 10 of my songs, who then introduced me to John and Yoko, and he loved the songs. And it led to a 3-day experience in Apple in 1968, May, which resulted in me being offered a recording contract for Apple to release a single, which was 2 songs, Love Is for the Young and Old, and With This New Girl. So I still have a copy of the With This New Girl demo, which your listeners can find on YouTube under Barry Greenfield, With This New Girl. The demo's there. And I couldn't believe they offered me a recording contract. I didn't want a recording contract. I wanted to be a songwriter. I had no interest in singing. I couldn't really tune my guitar. I certainly had never played with another musician by age 17. And so I went to Hyde Park and I wandered around and walked in and said, I can't do it. I don't want to do it. I don't want to be famous. I don't want to sing. I just want to write songs. And they understood, and they said, thanks for coming. I can't believe you walked in the door. Nobody else did or has at that point. And I came home. And so I'm now 75. So that's, 60 years, 58 years. And I've always wondered, I've never regretted the decision. It was the right decision because I wouldn't be here today if I would have accepted it, I believe. But I've always wondered, what would have happened if I would have walked through door number 3 and said yes? And that's what the book, All You Need Is Courage, about a fictional 19-year-old kid called Adam Bond. I was 17, he's 19 in the book. Felt more real to me to be 19. And what happened because he said yes to John Lennon, and the story goes from there. He signs the contract, he makes the single, he has John Paul Jones as his producer, and there's a reason for that. And then the next 300 pages is the story of what happened because he had the courage to do it and the courage to say yes. I didn't have the courage to say yes.
And the title comes from you having had that courage in the first place to get on the plane and go over there.
And walk up the steps and walk in the door and be normal around John Lennon. I wasn't in awe, and I wasn't stammering, and I didn't sweat. I was talking to him. I had the ability, even though I'm nervous and shy and introverted and all those things that you can't imagine, I am blabbing away here. I can rise to the occasion. I'm not, fame has never awed me, ever. And I've used it my whole life to introduce myself to Kenny Rogers, to Sheryl Crow, to all these people, because David Grohl.
Sonny and Cher.
Yeah, all of them. And they all love it. All they want is for you to be normal. They don't want you to say, oh, yes, Mr. Bono, I really liked I Got You, babe. They don't want that. They want, how do you like Vancouver,
Well, exactly. I assume that courage is what has sustained you in whatever career that you've had over these years.
Having children, getting married, travel. I'm scared all the time. I get scared at airports. I get scared in traffic jams. I'm an anxious dude, but I don't surrender. I have the courage.
So is there something that you tell yourself or something that you do to give you that courage when you're in that moment and you're nervous and you're trepidatious? Is there some mantra that you tell yourself? Is there something you do?
No, sir. I just think of I don't do this consciously, but now that you bring it up, I think of a guy in the trenches in World War II, or I think of the woman that's going through Harvey Weinstein's world, the courage it takes to take on those battles. And the battles that have come my way have been very little. I lived in Rhodesia from age 7 to age 13, and then South Africa from age 15 to 17 before I came to Canada. And I witnessed apartheid and racism firsthand every day. And it took me about 5 years to realize that it was wrong. First, it just seemed normal. It's so easy to be superior. And I suddenly, at age 12, realized how wrong it was. And I think that really influenced my life, that I had realized that no one's better than me, and I'm not better than nobody. And we're all descendants of monkeys. And I've always felt that I'm not better than you, and you're not better than me. So it doesn't really take a lot of courage. But fear is just false evidence appearing real. So don't surrender.
So at the top of your book, you have a wonderful quote from Seneca, the philosopher, the Stoic philosopher from a couple thousand years ago. And the quote is, quote, "It is not because things are difficult that we do not dare, but because we do not dare, things are difficult." Is that your life philosophy too?
Well, I took that quote. I've known that quote for a long time, and it's really about courage as well. But like John Lennon and Paul McCartney on The Tonight Show were probably watched by 15 million people that wrote music and living in Chicago, living in Adelaide, living in Detroit, living in Toronto. But according to John, nobody came. Like all the acts that the Beatles signed for Apple didn't walk in the door. They were all like referred, or something like Mal Evans brought back. Jackie Lomax was a friend of the band from Liverpool. Mary Hopkins was Paul saw on the Opportunity Knocks television show, which is the earliest version of American Idol. So nobody walked in the door, even though John said, come, no, nobody did, except for this 17-year-old, skinny little, ordinary songwriting guy who had courage. And yeah, that's why I used that quote.
As you said a few moments ago, your story with the Beatles, your literal story, stops after a few days in England. But Adam's story goes on well beyond that. How much of what percentage would you say of the book is based on your truth, your experience, versus you've made it up whole cloth?
A lot of it is based on my experiences inserted into his experiences. Like my developing my friendship with Mary Hopkins, I had the same with another artist. My working in Trident Studios with Nicky Hopkins and the English top session people that were called
the Wrecking Crew.
The London Wrecking Crew. Thank you, brother. In LA, I worked with Larry Carlton, Joe Osborne, Jim Gordon, Larry Mahobrak, Dean Parks. They were the American Wrecking Crew. And so the relationships I built with Jim Gordon and with Larry, I just inserted as if they were them. So there is a basis of reality to the whole book. When I go on tour with Joan Baez, when I go on tour with Donovan, the hotels, the sound checks, the live shows, the reactions are closely parallel to my tours with Supertramp and John Lee Hooker and many others. I toured with lots and lots of people.
So that's based on your experience, but you've changed names. Is that the way it went?
Well, I couldn't use Supertramp because they didn't exist in 1968. I did a concert, an imaginary concert in St. Paul's Cathedral with Mary Hopkins. Now, Mary Hopkins did that concert. So she sang 3 songs in St. Paul Cathedral after she had to hit Those Were the Days. So all I did was add myself to the bill, and I sang 4 songs. And then I got from that the opening slot on the new Yardbirds doing a show at the New Marquee, which was true. The dates are accurate in the book. The New Yardbirds, which became Led Zeppelin a week later, their first live gig as a band, the New Yardbirds with Page, Plant, Bonham, and Jones, was at the New Marquee. So I worked out how big the Marquee was. I found out the crowd. I found out the set, what they played that night, and I added myself as if it existed. So even though I wasn't there, it appears I was there, and it feels believable because it blends in. And the 3 songs I played that night at the New Marquee were the 3 songs that I closed with when I played the 12 Bar Club in London in 1974. And that was my best evening on stage ever, 1974 in London. I headlined it at a really, really, really famous club called the 12 Bar that Dylan and the Stones had played at. And the reaction from the 350 sold out crowd was like, it was unbelievable, and I'll never forget it. And I killed because I really shone, because I was so scared to be in London performing. It was just so scary, but I did well, and that's what Adam does at the New Marquee.
You must be very good at not showing it.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. I hear all the time, Barry, you look so great up there. You look so relaxed. Shit myself.
We have that in common, Barry, because I'm pretty cool looking on stage. I've done a number of things in front of people. I've interviewed some huge names in front of crowds, and I think I come off as being cool, calm, and collected, but inside it's like total cacophony.
Makes perfect sense. I once read, and I hope it's true, Don Rickles threw up every night. And he comes out there, who's more confident than Don Rickles? You know, I've done the last 3 concerts I've done, which goes back 18 months. 2 of them, I've walked off into an ambulance and gone to hospital because my heart is so weak. And I get to the point in the set, and the last one was about 1 hour and 40 minutes in, when I realized I can't breathe, can't get my breath. So I just sort of do the last song, which is always Needless Close Tonight. And then I walk out, and I was so weak that my wife put me in an ambulance, and I was in hospital. Yeah, but when you're there and performing, I don't care if you're Steve Cuden or if you're McCartney, you have to acclimatize. It's a different person in a way.
Well, you know, you can either, at that moment, see if you agree with me, at that moment, you can either fold or go forward with some degree of, you're there for a reason. They didn't book you at that venue because they knew you'd be terrible. So the expectation is that you know what you're doing, and then you're just doing your best to not show your nerves and get through it as the pro that you are. That's how I think of it.
I think of that exactly the same way. And to add to it, there's a commitment involved here. Like, these people sometimes and usually are paid, and they've driven and they've parked, and some of them find it hard to find the $80, you know. So there's a promissory note between you and the lady, the gentleman, the teenager, the retiree in the audience, to don't steal the money, you know. They're paid to see a professional and act like one, or don't take the gig.
And so how many people that are in the book that are real? You have 2 lists in the book, one of the actual humans that the world knows that are discussed in the book, and a second list of those that you made up. How many of the people that are listed in the book that are real were people that you've actually interacted with? Most of them?
Every one, I would think.
Every one of them. Because it's huge. The list is huge, and it's impressive. Are all the people that you talk about at Apple actually people that are at Apple? I know that...
No. Well, you know, obviously Derek Taylor is, and obviously the receptionist was. I made up her name, Jillian.
And John Lennon, obviously.
Yes, and Jillian, and George Harrison, and Patty Harrison, and Paul McCartney, and Linda Eastman comes in towards the end of the book, because that's the date that she arrived. When Paul McCartney comes backstage to congratulate me at the Marquee, it was the night that Linda and him first met in London. Yeah, now he didn't go to the Marquee as far as I know, but I let him come to the Marquee. So she comes walking in, and she's wearing an oversized jacket that I assume was Paul's. And he says to me, congratulations, I couldn't believe that you could pull that off. You're so mild and you were so aggressive up there. We have to leave because our chauffeur, which is correct, his name, is taking us home. And then we're off to New York tomorrow. What he didn't tell me, but I knew from my research, was they were off to New York to meet Linda's family. When it says in the book that George is in California and then in Woodstock, New York with Bob Dylan, those dates are accurate. That's where he was. So I said to Derek, I really miss George. I haven't seen him for 10 days. George and I are quite close in the book. And he says, oh, well, he's in California. And that trip to California and Paul's trip to New York coincide with the end of the White Album. So they finish recording. They're sick to death of seeing each other. They're sick to death of working. So they all fly away. And John was the only Beatle in Apple when I went there. The others were away.
Interesting. And yet in the book, Adam confronts all of them at Apple and then beyond. You do tell this tale in the first person. So that then it feels autobiographical or biographical, that you're telling it in the first person. Was that an easy decision for you to make as opposed to telling it in the third person?
I think the answer is there was no decision. I just did it because I am Adam Bond. Like Adam Bond is, if I would have said yes, that's how I would have imagined it went. I don't have the ability to imagine it being the Jackie Lomax story where it was like, I've read a lot about Jackie Lomax. He was not cool. He was aggressive and demanding, and whereas Mary was really shy and was scared of London because she was from a little town in Wales. So I didn't really have much choice. In order for it to work, it had to be first person for me because that's how I wanted to live the tale.
So it felt like you were reading a personal diary is the way that it felt, like a journal, which is a very effective way to write a book. I was just curious if there was a decision process and you're saying, no, this is just the way it had to be.
That was the default. I didn't think of the other option. Never crossed my mind because it was just it began in truth, which is unusual for a novel because I did go to London and this is just what would have happened if I would have taken door number 3 instead of door number 1.
How many of the song titles that you have Adam creating in the book, how many of those are real songs?
100%.
100. They're all your songs.
Yeah, all my lyrics. So, when I'm in Paris, I meet this woman, this teenager called Laurie. Well, Laurie's my wife, and she's 5 feet from me right now. So even though I didn't meet Laurie until I was 63, this 19-year-old Adam meets Laurie. And there's a song in there called Paris, France that I wrote for Laurie, and all the lyric in the book, it's exactly what the song says. And so there's a lot of truth in the book in between the fantasy and the dreamlike quality of some of the stories that obviously I never met George Harrison, I never met Paul McCartney, but if I would have, because I know who they are and what they're like, because I spent 50 years studying them, this is what I think would have happened, but we don't really know.
Well, one of the great admonitions that writing teachers give to their students and writers will share with other writers is to write what you know. And I have long said that writing what you know really means write what you know in your heart, not necessarily what you've personally experienced. And I use as an example of that, James Cameron, when he wrote The Terminator, had never actually met a Terminator. Straight people that write cartoons don't actually know cartoon characters, they just know people. And so you actually wrote a book that you do know.
Yeah, I'm not going to write it. Yeah, I did. I've lived studios, I've lived recording. I might not have said yes to Beatles, but I did say yes to Burt Bacharach's publisher, and I did say yes to the manager in New York, and I did say yes to David Kirschenbaum and the head of RCA. I did say yes down the road. So all of these things happened to me when I said yes to other people. So there is a foundation in the book of what I lived in my life. And I just want to add to the Terminator line, that's fabulous. The other one that comes to mind is I am very iffy about Bruce Springsteen. There's things I really like about Bruce Springsteen and there's things I really don't, but mostly it's his band that I like, the E Street Band. But he did a TV show from Broadway called Springsteen on Broadway 3 or 4 years ago. Did you ever see it?
I did not see it, but I know about it.
It's on Netflix, and it's with Bruce Springsteen. I can only last 20 minutes, so all I watched was the first 20 minutes. And he's so talented, but just not my cup of tea. And he says, in his way of being honest, and he's not ad-libbing. The whole show is scripted. In all the stuff between each song, and each song is planned. He says, I wrote songs about motorcycles. I wrote songs about blue-collar jobs, and the list goes on. And I never did any of that stuff back then. So he was writing about the Terminator as Barry Greenfield is writing about Harrison and Patty and their house. But when I go to their house, you can now find out what their house looked like and where the swimming pool was and what was on the walls and all of his guitars, and going to his guitar tech together. When he bought me my guitar, when I went to the guitar tech because he was fixing George's SG, it's all based upon the actual guitar. So the things that, the humbuckers and stuff are all what he had in his guitar. He had 3 humbuckers, and the heads, I got the names of the heads, and they're all described correctly. And his guitar tech is his guitar tech, who was Clapton's guitar tech and Bowie's guitar tech. And I got where he lived, where his office was, where his studio was. And we go there, we walk in, and it's all, it's not bullshit coming from the sky. It's based upon what happened in 1968 with George Harrison walking through the street with his hat on, how he won't go into a cafe because it never works, but he can walk down the street as long as he walks fast and he has his collar up. And I read all that, and I made out he said it to me.
So it's a personal reflection throughout the book, and I suppose you could also call it, there's a term called historical fiction, and in a way this is historical fiction in a way.
In a way, but it's not really true, because I didn't say yes to John. It's if I said yes to John.
Well, that's what happens in historical fiction, is it's history, but it's also fictional.
Okay, I'll buy it then. Okay, I'll use that label too. I've learned 2 things today. Yeah, I thought it was just a novel, but now it's historical fiction.
Before Barry and I started the show, we briefly spoke about that this book could technically be called a roman à clef, which is, there's truth. The story's based on a real story, but you've made up fictional characters and so on in it. And that's what Barry has done. And it's thoroughly enjoyable to read, especially because you're closely following the actual Beatles and having experiences with Adam Bond in it. And it's very interesting. You were Adam is first produced in the book by, as we spoke earlier, John Paul Jones from Led Zeppelin. Were you produced by John Paul Jones?
No, but my great dear friend Graham Gouldman from 10cc was, and his first solo album, the Graham Gouldman thing, was produced by John Paul Jones. And John Paul Jones did a lot of production. He produced a lot of Donovan songs, Dusty Springfield. He was also in the Shadows for a while when Bruce Welch left. So John Paul Jones had a presence in London, but the people in the street didn't know it, but the studios knew it, and Jimmy Page knew it, and Dusty Springfield knew it. So when John wanted me to go in the studio, he, just to do the single, because we started off with just doing the 2 songs, he said, I'm going to hire John Paul Jones. So he said to Derek, phone John, and then John comes walking to Apple 3 or 4 days later to meet me to produce the single. So I found out how tall he was. I found out how old he was. I found out his wife's name. I found out when he got married. And he comes in with a leather satchel, which who knows if that's true or not. And we then worked together, and he helped me the way he helped Graham.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Well, you know that you also write in the book that Lennon respected courage, belief, and action. Talk minus action equals 0. All you need is courage. You wrote that in the book. Did Lennon ever say anything like that to you?
Yes and no. No, he never said that to me. But what he did say to me was, I can't believe you did this. Like, you flew from, like he said, I think he never asked if I had any money, but it was pretty obvious most kids didn't, right? I wasn't dressed like in wealthy clothes. I had the shirt that I got for Christmas when I was 16 on when I walked in. It was a blue shirt. And there's a picture in the Blue Sky book taken that day where I have a jacket on with the Union Jack pin on it. So you can tell I was a student, I guess. I looked like Canadian student, American student. And he was like dumbfounded. So Like there were also, there's an English word, which I hope you understand, it's called gobsmacked.
Yes, I know gobsmacked well.
I might be exaggerating because it was a long time ago, but I got the feeling that when I left the room, John turned to, I don't know if this is true, John turned to Derek and said, that motherfucker flew from Canada and just walked in the door. Because what people don't understand is that there was no security. There was no guard outside.
Well, you couldn't do that today.
No. You couldn't phone Sonny and Cher in the hotel room today. It was a different world. Yeah.
Totally. If if somebody gets the gumption to say, I'm going to go meet Taylor Swift, you're going to be met with very big men, usually packing heat.
You have no chance. Like, it's not like if you're charming or if you have a note or if you're kind or if you bring their flowers, you have no chance. They have a zero tolerance policy for closeness to a star. That's what they pay for, zero. And I walked in the Apple building, and inside the Apple building was 4 people. The receptionist, who was an 18-year-old Carnaby Street lady, John Lennon, Yoko Ono, harmless people, and Derek Taylor, who was the most sort of focused and centered kind of business guy, who said to me, well, do you have a cassette to give John? And I said, oh, I've never made a cassette. I've never recorded any of my songs. Well, Barry, how do you plan on showing your songs to John? And I picked up my $25 guitar, because that's what I had in a plastic case. And I said, on this. And he said, it made perfect sense. It was a straight line. So I guess he looked in my eyes and said, well, the guys come from Vancouver, Canada. It's a 12-hour flight back then. Let me be kind enough.
And he listened to your stuff.
He loved them. He was gobsmacked. And he said, well, he took me to John's office right after. He said, this guy's great. And they were looking for artists. It wasn't like I wasn't invited.
Well, you were invited off of the TV.
Yeah, I was invited. It wasn't like I was invited.
It wasn't a personal invitation, but you took it personally.
It was a personal invitation. He was talking to me. Steve, it really felt like, I really felt like it came through. I felt his eyes, I felt his energy. And I went because it felt really good.
Well, I think you're unusual, really unusual, in the sense that you took it as an invitation to go. Most people would have said, I can't go over there. I can't do that. But you had the courage and maybe a little bit of insanity to get in a plane and go do that.
I totally think both those words apply. But, Bowie had like 2 or 3 albums that did nothing. He didn't stop. He went on and on and on. And then he heard Rocket Man by Elton, and he wrote Space Oddity. And that opened up all the doors for him. And Elton was always pissed off at that. He thought that Bowie stole his song, and he didn't. They're completely different songs.
I think of David Bowie as maybe the ultimate artist. He was a true artist. He was not making music for the public. He was making art. And that's how he operated. And I think a lot of artists today, and maybe throughout much of history, do it because they're trying to make a living. And I think he was a true grounded artist.
Couldn't agree more. And they're not doing it because they want to make a living. They're doing it because they want to get rich. Once you start making art, because like I produced a lot of bands, mostly young bands. And after about 2 hours with those incredibly $8,000 speakers and the right walls and the guy playing with the desk and making them sound better before auto-tune and all that, the thing that was almost constant was, this is very Beatles-ish. This is very Beatles-ish. No, it's not. It's not in the same ballpark as the B word, But Bowie was my favorite because of what you just said, and his tenacity and his courage to do Ziggy Stardust. He never stayed on the same train. He changed trains for every station. And I've done that with my songs. They're all different. You asked me, am I still creating, still writing? Well, Bowie's last album with Lazarus on it, was it called Black Star?
Black Star.
It's a monstrous album.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Yeah, and it's not a kid's album. It's cranked up with Tony Visconti, and it's kicking ass, and every song is just, whoa. And he's dying, my friend. If you watch the video for Dying, where he comes out of the closet like a coffin, I mean, this man, I just want to shake his hand. I want to say, David, the song Bowie, which I'm going to send you when we hang up, I'll send you the long version, which has 2 versions. It has the acoustic version and then the band version. Because I'll bore you for 6 minutes because I'm willing to take the risk because I have the courage to lay it on you. It's just I was so sad that he died. I think I was surprised. I knew he was sick, but you never think these guys are ever going to go. But all the money in the world, which I wrote a song about, can't save you. All the money in the world can't save you when you're sick, like Linda McCartney, David Bowie, Dave Mason. You're on your way.
No one that I'm aware of, neither fame nor fortune nor power, has ever saved anyone from that ultimate demise.
And never will.
And never will. Well, I don't want to say never, but it's unlikely. Let's put it that way.
I'll give you that.
They're now talking about, capturing your soul, your brain, your thoughts, whatever it is that they're trying to capture in a digital form so that you can go on and on. It's a little science fiction-y to me.
There's a huge amount of money being spent on taking humans to Mars, and a huge amount of time and investment that people are being paid $400,000 a year to look into. And there's another school of thought that says it's absolutely impossible to send a human to Mars because their body will disintegrate so much in the 2 years before they get there that when they get there, it'll continue to disintegrate. So you can never leave. And going to Mars is just as stupid as saying I'm going to catch a fart in a bucket. It's never going to happen.
It's a fool's errand is what it is. You write a wonderful line in the book that goes, "Time is linear. We are all one." What does that mean?
Borrowed from my wife, Lori. It hinges on what I said earlier about Steve Cuden isn't better than me, and I'm not better than Steve Cuden. And Yoko Ono isn't better than me, and I'm not better than Yoko Ono. We're all one. Like we all have our foibles. We all have our craziness, mishigases. We all have our weirdness. We all have our, like you said, part insanity to get in that plane. Well, I'm no more insane than you and no less insane than you. I'm just me and you're just you. And as long as you have an openness to not be judgmental and to just love, which I fail a lot of the time to do, you'll get by.
You cannot succeed, in my opinion, without failing. You have to fail to succeed.
100%, and you learn more from failure than success. And Frank Zappa said, failure is never final, and failure is never fatal, and success is never final.
That's very good. That's very wise. You've spoken a couple times in this episode about the great Nicky Hopkins. For the listeners who don't know who he was, tell them who Nicky Hopkins was.
Nicky Hopkins came onto the British music scene in '65, and just everybody loved him. So to give some examples of his art, he played the electric piano on the Beatles' Revolution, which sure as hell helped the song as much as Billy Preston did down the road. He played the piano on so many Stones songs, and the most famous one, I suppose, is She's a Rainbow. And he wrote what's called the returning lick. So it starts off with a lick, then he plays the chords, then he goes back to it. And of course, didn't get paid for it. Just like Larry Neckel didn't get paid for Bridge Over Troubled Waters, even though it's such an integral part. Larry told me that himself. There is nobody with more sensitivity. I'm thinking maybe you can verify this or tell me I'm wrong. Did Nicky play Angie?
I think he did play Angie.
Sounds like him. So if you listen to the piano on Angie, of course, Keith's guitar is fabulous because Keith's an amazing guitar player, acoustic especially, everything. But Nicky brought so much feel to Angie, We Love You. Like he just knew how to drive songs. So when I go to do my first two songs with John Paul Jones, he hires the band, which is the London Wrecking Crew, which is 3 guys, old guys. They're very staid. I fired them after the session. I won't work with them again. But I kept Nicky because Nicky, I found out how, if you look at any picture of Nicky, he's dressed like Rod Stewart. He's a rock star. He's got a scarf on, he's got boots, he's got high boots, he's got really tight pants, he's a stud. And he's got the haircut of Jeff Beck. He looks like a rock star, whereas the other guys look like plumbers. And Nicky added so much to me that he added to the Stones and to the Beatles and to the Kinks and to the Who. He played on My Generation, for God's sake. My Generation, I don't even know what the piano sounds like in that, but he was there playing on it. So Nicky Hopkins was one of the most successful he played electric piano and organ, but mostly electric, mostly acoustic piano, grand piano. And so I used grand piano on 6 of the 12 songs from the Adam Bond album. And then I did one with just me and Nicky, and which John really liked a lot. Of course, I've always liked that, one voice, one piano, one voice, one guitar. And he was just a gentleman and a scholar. And I learned that from reading about him. And I spoke to a gentleman who did an autobiography of Nicky Hopkins, who'd been studying him for a decade. So if he was a badass guy and late and drunk and stoned and stupid, he wouldn't have worked with the Beatles and the Stones. There's a line in the book where Adam Bond gets arrested by the police. And he gets arrested because the guy he's eating breakfast with tries to sell him drugs. And he doesn't buy the drugs, and then the guy asks him for referrals. He doesn't give him any, and he leaves to sell drugs to. But the police are photographing the meeting, which Adam doesn't know. And so Adam goes to the police station. He's there for a few hours, and he gets interrogated. They let him go because he's not guilty of anything. And when Adam gets the tube back, he phones Derek Taylor. Derek Taylor gives him a referral that no, Barry would never do that. Adam would never do that. And so it takes an hour to get back there, and he's scared he's going to be fired from Apple. And he walks into Apple, and Derek Taylor's waiting for him with a cup of tea and a sandwich that Sheila, the lady who plays a big part in the book, makes for them. And Adam says to Derek, I hope you guys don't fire me. And Derek says to Barry, you know, the Beatles are really, really smart. They're not only the hardest working band in show business, they're the most clever band in show business, and they don't make very many mistakes. And no one gets through that front door and is accepted without them approving it. And everybody that works in here, from me to the chauffeurs to the guy who changes light bulbs, is vetted to make sure that they're the right type. And Nicky Hopkins would have not have gone in the room for more. They would have not used his first part if they hired him. I'm sure Mick said, this Nicky is just incredible. And John brought him in for Revolution. I mean, they didn't need him on Revolution, but the part he added made the song historic.
Well, he's one of the greatest, what's known as a session pianist ever, session keyboardist. And there are people who are very well known in the music world for their session work, but are not known outside by the general public. He's one of those kinds of people.
He's the creme of the creme. So
the creme de la creme.
So one thing I just want to, I've always said it, I think, in this interview, but working with Larry Carlton, who played with Steely Dan, who's considered the greatest guitar player by many people in American studio history, because he's a session player, did have solo albums, but Steely Dan never used his name. They just used his guitar and gave him one little line on the back of the album. He was Nicky Hopkins, but on a guitar in America. So everything about Nicky Hopkins, professionalism, was what I learned from working 3 weeks, 6 days a week with Larry Carlton. And Larry Carlton and I became best friends for that 3 weeks. Never seen him since. But he was being paid handsomely, but had nothing to do with money for Larry. He really liked my music. And that's where Nicky fits into this book. Obviously, he's being paid, but he's not coming back for more because he gets paid. I'm sure he does that. I'm sure they all do that. But he's coming back for Barry, or for Adam, excuse me. The second time I made that slip. He comes back for Adam because he liked the energy and the music and the songs.
What do you think that is, if you have any idea, because I don't really know what it is, that separates a Nicky Hopkins and a Larry Carlton from becoming superstars in the public eye, where they're famous and they're touring and they're known? What is it that they don't have that then a John Lennon does have?
The only answer I can give you, because I don't know the answer, is some people are not designed to be Rod Stewart. Some people are not designed to be silly Madonna. Some people are not designed to be Adam Lambert. They're designed to make music. And when Nicky Hopkins puts his soul into Angie, or She's a Rainbow, or Revolution, he walks out of there just as happy with a Cheshire smile and the love that he got from the people that he knows are really talented. I think it's just gold, desire, ability, and happiness with your lot in life. As Donovan said, it's not your lot in life, Lelania. I think it's not your lot in life, Nicky, to be the Elton John. Elton John was as good a piano player as Nicky Hopkins. Elton John on Blue Moves and any of those records, Don't Shoot Me, it's equal. But Elton John had the missing DNA part that said, hey, I'm not Reg Dwight, I'm Elton John. Nicky Hopkins didn't say, I'm not Nicky Hopkins, I'm Sam Shepard. And then goes off and plays piano and stands up and kicks the things and wears a duck outfit. Some of these guys will do anything. And the exception to the rule is Bowie. Bowie didn't chase fame. Fame chased him. Elton chased fame. The Beatles chased fame. Mick's still chasing fame at 86, whatever he's 83. It's just ridiculous. I've never wanted fame. I've turned it down, and it's a wild animal. And if you don't want to be in the room with the tiger, you shouldn't walk into the room with the tiger.
Mm-hmm. That's for sure. I think in that era, maybe a little ahead of Nicky Hopkins, but I think of Keith Emerson, that Nicky Hopkins is like Keith Emerson in a way, but Emerson did not really become famous as Keith Emerson. He became famous in a band called Emerson, Lake and Palmer, but not as Keith Emerson.
Yeah, Keith Emerson died recently and couldn't play piano for many years because his arthritis was so bad in his fingers. Broke my heart when I read that. Yeah, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, not my cup of tea, but I understood what tea they made,
Right, sure. Well, that's the actual first rock and roll band I ever saw in concert.
Oh, it must have been an amazing night with the spinning piano and all.
I'll never forget it. He actually, and it was part of the act, he actually would get under the piano and bring the keyboard down on him and hump the piano. And it was like, wow. That was like, I was a kid. I was all of like 12 years old or something like that. But
I don't think Nicky Hopkins would have humped a piano.
No, absolutely not. 100% not. I was going to say, you have a chapter in the book called Thought is the Enemy of Flow. I love that. Explain.
Don't think too much when you're making art. There's a great line that Quincy Jones put on the studio door when he's recording We Are the World, and that is, leave your ego outside the studio or something, or leave your ego at the door, I think it was. So if you're thinking too much, you're thinking with your ego. If you're not thinking, you're following your heart. I'm not a great guitar player, but I'm a very unique acoustic guitar player. And there's a lady who came to one of my shows and she said, you're the sickest guitar player I've ever seen. And it's because I just don't play like anybody else. I can't finger pick like Gordon Lightfoot. I can't finger pick like Bob Dylan. I can't play a lot of the chords that Paul McCartney plays. So I just do what I can do. And I have weird tunings like Keith Richards and Joni Mitchell. And I have notes, single note stuff that I do. So I have a developed art, which is not with thought, but with flow. So when you're making music, you're in a canoe and you're going down the river. And the best way to go down the river is to lay back in the canoe and let the current take you. And if you're paddling all the time, you're thinking too much about putting the paddle in the water. I just like to go with the flow. You
have your own voice, and that voice is clearly and distinctly yours. I mean, that's what that eventually, I think that's what that means in terms of the art that you're creating. It has to come from you, flow from you, and not be contrived.
I think a great example of that phrase is Tom Waits.
I think that's true.
Tom Waits doesn't listen to no one. Tom, you don't sing so good. Let the Eagles sing Saturday Night. What's it, Saturday? Whatever the song is about, freeways, cars, and trucks. Old 55. And it's from his album Saturday Night. And the Eagles do Old 55 unbelievably well, but Tom Waits does it better. And Tom Waits can't sing like Glenn Fry. Tom Waits sings like Tom Waits, which is a drunk old man in an alleyway.
Yeah, it sounds like he's just swallowed broken glass. I mean, he's got a very distinct voice. It's not
no range,
can barely really carry the tune, but nobody cares because it's all about what he's bringing to it.
It's the whole entity. It's the package.
Yes, absolutely correct.
Everything he does, his lyrics, his music, his ambiance, his titles. He's brilliant.
Explain what you mean by the art of surfacing.
When you sign to a record label, you do all the work, you record the songs, you mix the songs, you approve or get approved the packaging for the LP, and it's all ready to be shipped. And then these guys, or these in suits, and these ladies in business suits and high heels, and then help you surface. So they concoct all these selling points. I've always been compared to other Canadian songwriters of ilk, like Gordon Lightfoot and Bruce Cockburn and people like that. I've never been compared to the Guess Who or anything like that, but people that are more sort of Bruce Cockburn-y. And when they help you surface, you have to keep control of that. Otherwise, you can become something to the world that you're not. And one of the best designers of their surfacing was Bob Dylan. And if you ever read his book, Chronicles, Volume 1, that was his surfacing period. And it's where he controlled it all. He controlled the bio, which was bullshit. He controlled the songs. He wanted to do his own songs after he did the cover songs. And so how you surface is how you land. And surfacing has very little to do with you. It has a lot to do with the machine.
It's how you come out and become marketed, yes?
Yes, as Pink Floyd said, welcome to the machine. Have a cigar. It's bullshit. You know, when I was 17, I wrote a song that I've never finished, Steve, and I really want to finish it. And it's called The Music Business. And the lyric is, don't forget it's the music business. Don't forget where the emphasis is. It used to be the music, but now it's completely on the business. So that was 1967 when I thought of that, and it's more true today than ever. Business, business, business. These rock stars today that come from The Voice and America's Got Talent and Machinery, they're rock stars. They're not artists.
Many of them I see are quite soulless. They are part of the machine. Every once in a while, somebody breaks out who actually has soul, but that's not the commonality. It's just the occasional person that does that.
Well, Sam Smith had soul, but he blew it. It's very easy to blow it. It's a very fine line between keeping it real. Somehow McCartney has done. He's kept it real for, I don't know how, and I think it had a lot to do with Linda. I've always given Linda a lot of credit. But most of them don't, like Gary Newman and 10cc blew it. Queen towards the end got weaker and weaker. How is that possible with Freddie Mercury and Brian May and John Deacon and Roger Taylor in the band? How can you get weaker? I mean, they were so good, and then they got weaker and weaker.
This is a much longer and other conversation, but I believe that fame changes people in a very severe way most of the time. And most people cannot handle it. And so it affects them, and either they turn interior, or they've turned to drugs or alcohol or whatever, and it destroys them because they can't handle that thing called fame. Honestly, I've never been famous at all, and I don't know if I could handle it when I think about it.
Well, I made a conscious decision that I couldn't.
And you made a conscious decision not to. Well, I have been having just the most marvelous conversation with Barry Greenfield for the second time. Just a fantastic conversation. We're going to wind the show down just a little bit. And the standard questions that I ask almost every single guest, you've worked with huge numbers of people over time, some of them quite famous, many not. Can you share with us a story that's either weird, quirky, offbeat, strange, or just plain funny?
I was recording my RCA album in 1973. I was the chosen one at RCA. They gave me an enormous budget and the best players available, as I mentioned earlier, with Carlton and Osborne and others, Jim Gordon. And we were recording a song called Jack and Jill in Studio B. And Studio B was a small studio. There was only 2 studios at RCA, but Studio A was the other. And Studio B was Elvis's studio. It's where Elvis did all of his Hollywood work. And I made sure I stood where Elvis stood, and we talked about that in the last interview, I think. So I had to go to the bathroom, like everybody does. And I go in the bathroom, and it's just down the hall to the left, about 3 doors. I walk in, and it's a very nice appointed bathroom, and it's empty except for one fella, and that fella's Harry Nilsson. And Harry Nilsson, who I absolutely adore, gone too soon, 49. cancer, was snorting cocaine. And I'd never seen cocaine, but I knew it was cocaine because it was a little silver spoon. And he turns to me and he said, "Would you like some?" And I said, "No, didn't even smoke pot back then." And he talked for about 10 minutes in the toilet, very normal conversation about recording. And then he said, "If you get time, Barry, come to Studio A. I'm mixing my Son of Dracula soundtrack." So I go back in the B, and I'm super pumped and super excited. And I said to David Kirshenbaum, who went on to win 75 industry awards, this was his first album, so he was not huge and not famous. I said, "I just met Harry Nilsson," and he says, "Come to A." And David said, "Go, go, go, go." And I told this whole story in the Blue Sky book. So I go to the door and I knock on Studio A, and Harry says, "Come in." So I walk in, and there's only two guys in there, Harry and the engineer. And I sit for 2.5 hours, and we work on his music. And it had Klaus Voormann on bass, Mickey Hopkin on piano, and other people that was just, George Harrison playing cowbell, if you can believe it. This is George Harrison playing cowbell. And I made him isolate the cowbell so I could hear it. I forgot where I was. I didn't think of anything. And in the door opens, first time it opened in the 2 hours I was there, in walks Ringo Starr and his producer and Nilsson's producer, Richard Perry. Now, Ringo is 5'6", 5'7". Richard Perry is 6'4". That was weird. But to turn around and to see a Beatle, just crazy. I mean, it's met John Lennon, but that was years before. This was 1973. And he had a half empty bottle of Jack Daniels in his hand, did Ringo. And he was drunk. And he was dirty. And he was disheveled. And so was Richard Perry. Not quite as drunk, not quite as dirty, not quite as disheveled. But I think Ringo, just from guesstimation, was on a binge. And he hands the bottle to Harry. Harry sipped from the bottle. Then they passed the cocaine around. And I moved from the chair next to Harry, where I'd been sitting the whole time, to the back of the room. And the real reason I share the story is because I became invisible. And the reason I became invisible is because a Beatle entered the room. And they didn't talk to me. They didn't really say anything to me. And Harry just turned me off like it was a light bulb switch. And I got up to leave, and Harry turned to Ringo, and my name is Barry Greenfield. And he said to Ringo, Ringo, Richard, didn't say Ringo, Richard, this is Barry Greenberg. Didn't correct him. Same with the other guy, Barry Greenberg, shook his hand. And I said, "I'm going to go now. Thank you so much for everything you did, Harry." Harry didn't say a word. And so what I learned from that is that when a Beatle, be it Ringo, be it Paul, be it George, be it Johnny, comes into a world, that's what they have to live with. It's just different. He was normal, drunk, but normal. Kept on drinking the whole time. 4, 5, 6 minutes. I was there every 6 minutes with them. But I later read a story from Eric Clapton. And Eric Clapton said in the mid-'70s, I was the king of London. I was called God. That's what they called him, God, the guitar player, Eric. And he said, wherever I went, the whole world stopped because I was Eric Clapton. But then I became friends with George Harrison. And wherever I went with George Harrison, and the word that Eric Clapton used, I became invisible and no one saw me. And I'm sure it's not true today because the aura and the fear and the social media thing, everything's changed now. And TikTok, and you can't turn on YouTube without seeing Paul McCartney, just frightening how much attention he still gets. But that was a story.
I think that's very heady stuff. Very Hollywood, very heady stuff indeed. Do you know the story about John Lennon more or less destroyed Harry Nilsson's voice, that glorious voice? You know that story?
Cocaine.
But they got into a competition with one another in the studio to who could shriek louder.
I didn't know that. This is the Pussycats days?
This is back in the Whiskey A Go-Go days.
Pussycat recording the Pussycat album, yeah. Correct.
And they were in the studio, and Lennon could shriek like nobody's business, and Nilsson, who had that he was maybe the greatest rock and roll singer of all time.
I'm not going to argue.
Arguably. And he tried to out-shriek Lennon, and from that day forward, he came out of there with blood coming out of his mouth.
I've never heard that story. Thank you for sharing that. And I bought Nilsson's last album, which was remixed by a friend of his called Lost and Found 3 years ago. It was, obviously, he died much more than 3 years ago, a decade plus. And it was just pathetic because he couldn't sing.
He couldn't sing. Well, he shredded his voice.
Yeah, and I don't know whatever happened to Bon Jovi, but I think Celine Dion heard her voice. I think it's a very fragile thing. And Paul McCartney, when he talks now, sounds older than me. He is older than me, but he sounds a lot older than me. And he's been singing Lung Tol Sally, and maybe I'm amazed when she doesn't sing anymore. And it's a very fragile thing, a vocal cord, isn't it?
No kidding.
So the friendship of Harry Nilsson, which was based upon a love for each other's music, cocaine and booze, killed the radio star, killed Harry. And I didn't know that story about the shrieking. And it breaks my heart because it was completely unavoidable and it was two drunks being stupid.
No doubt. And then, I guess teenagers came out in them and they had to outdo one another. And Lennon won. That's how that worked.
It's very easy to be a kid when into music. As you correct me when I said work. You said, no, I hope we play. I had a discussion with a guy once in a record store about you play music, not work music. And it's so true. So, they got away with murder, those two guys, and whoever else was with them that week. And the last weekend. And who paid the biggest price? Harry.
Well, that's part of the problem with fame is that sometimes you're allowed to not grow up. And I don't mean grow. You still want to be youthful in your creativity, but you still have to be a mature human. And sometimes that maturity gets left behind.
You're so you're put on such a pedestal by everyone backstage. Laurie and I watched the Springsteen movie last week, the one where there's actors playing him, making the Nebraska album. And there's scenes where he's walking backstage and people call, hey, boss, how you doing, boss? Thanks, boss. I never knew that. I thought it was just a word. I didn't know that people actually called him boss. I found that totally scary. If someone called me boss, even if I was paying their salary, I would say, hey, man, my name is Bruce. Please don't call me boss. It's not a nickname.
You would want to be called Bruce?
Well, Barry.
I now will not call you boss, and I won't call you Bruce either.
You can call me Al.
I call you Al. Last question for you today, Barry. You've given out just lots of different, very interesting pieces of advice throughout this whole show. But I'm wondering, do you have a single piece of advice that you can share with those who are maybe starting out in the business or they're in a little bit trying to get to that next level?
At one point in the book, All You Need Is Courage, Adam Bond, by some rare sequence of events, get to be in Abbey Road recording one song, which was the single called Love Is Only a Number, and Age Is Only a Number, actually, with the four Beatles. And the reason it worked with the four of them and him was that he acted completely normal, but he also acted confident, and he also was prepared, and he also knew his role. And his role was to play the acoustic guitar on that one song with all four of them there. They did two other songs with just three of them, but only one with all four. And he knew his part. He had practiced it for days over and over again. So he knew his guitar part. He had to sing it, and he knew the vocal part, and he knew his job. So he didn't drop his ball, and he spoke when it was appropriate, and he was always listening. So all you need to succeed, really, you need talent for sure, and talent requires a lot of sweat and a lot of work and a lot of failure, and you need courage, and you need to be real, and you need not to think you're owed anything, because you're not. Because the reason Nicky Hopkins and Larry Carlton had a 25-year career, Larry Carlton's is 3 decades longer than that now, is because they showed up on time, they were prepared, and they had their instruments in tune. Do the small things and get them right and listen.
I think that's extraordinarily wise advice. And I think anybody that wants to be in pretty much any business, but especially in the arts, especially in music and theater and film, you've got to be prepared, and you've got to be prepared at the moment that your opportunity comes to take advantage of it. And that's what separates the successful ones from people who continue to work at it but may languish a little bit. Barry Greenfield, this has just been an absolutely fabulous show today, and I thank you so much for your time, your energy, and your wisdom. And for those of you that are interested, please go out and check out All You Need Is Courage. This is a lot of fun to read, and it's just a wonderful tale that I think that everyone that likes even a little bit the Beatles will enjoy thoroughly. Barry, thank you so much for being on with me today.
Thank you. It's like when I do a good show, and they're not all good shows, it just feels so nice. This feels really nice. And wouldn't it be nice to work together for a third time, please God?
Well, that would be a wonderful treat. And speaking of treats, as promised, we have a real gift for you. For your listening pleasure now, Barry has generously lent us his beautiful song, The Beautiful Band. So please sit back and enjoy.
What else do you want me to say? Anything else? Yeah.
We believe.
He did. Every player was boss, and the ones that I'm mentioning now, Sadio Mane. I said it last night.
George played guitar in The Beautiful Man. He wasn't rude on the tree. He spoke with his head, he lived in his heart. Baby, don't you bother me. Don't bother me, leave me alone. Fame ain't as sweet as a pear. Au revoir, babe, let me go home. Our music will always be there. Paul played the bass, he was a melancholy man. The keeper of the key to the locks. High like a bird, he was always alert. He slept in his tie and his socks. McCartney was always in key. They claim ain't as sweet as a pear. Oh, Blondie, let me go home. Our music will always be there. Ringo the drummer worked as hard as a plumber, made every tap drip stop. He listened and talked, he skipped when he walked. His hands kept time like a clock. Let him be and rub his soul. Pepper in the musical chair. It's not easy, let me go home. Our music will always be there. John Lennon, he imagined no heaven. He always was open and wise. The words he would sing explained many things, and then he got crucified. Crucify me, the ones in my tree. Pain ain't as sweet as a pear. And they complain, let me go home. Our music will always be there. Always be there. What's a bubble that do? The beautiful band.
And so we've come to the end of today's Story Beat. If you like this episode, won't you please take a moment to give us a comment, rating, or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to? Your support helps us bring more great StoryBeat episodes to you. StoryBeat is available on all major podcast apps and platforms, including Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and many others. Until next time, I'm Steve Cuden, and may all your stories be unforgettable.